Hello, happy hump day.
Hi, Jessie, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm really good. Thank you for asking. I'm good because I'm very excited. I'm excited. I'm going on holiday. I really need a holiday. I haven't been on holiday. Other than home, but home doesn't count as a holiday because that's family and visiting family. I haven't had a holiday for like 4 years.
Yeah, that's because COVID stopped everyone traveling. Where are you off to?
New Caledonia.
Oh, how exciting. It's supposed to be gorgeous.
I know.
Amazing.
I know. French. I'm gonna say I have to polish off my French, but I never learned French, so I'm not polishing anything.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's great. And who are you going with?
My mum.
Oh, that's even better. That's great.
I know. I haven't seen my mum in 3 years.
But then it will be extra special.
Mm,
That's brilliant. That's really good.
it
Yeah.
will.
First post-COVID holiday.
Yes.
We're definitely making the most of it.
Yes, I will be. I will be. So very excited. And how have you been?
I've been well. I've been well this week. What's this week turned up in Bhavna's world? Well, as I mentioned in the last podcast, I'm back trying online dating. And as we all know, it is a jungle out there. So yes, I'd probably put the experience. I've only been on there a few weeks, but the experience is very similar to the same entertainment value as what you do when you're applying for jobs and going for job interviews. That's how I describe it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I just say it's a jungle out there and there's some sloths. You know, the sloth.
What's a slow?
A sloth.
Oh, the sloth. Oh, are you referring to the people who are taking the approach, a very lazy kind of approach, where they just want to chat, just want to say hi, and that's their introduction? Is that what's determined as a sloth? Yeah.
Yes,
I think last week I had the experience of I did go on a date and they never turned up.
yeah.
So, and that wasn't so bad actually, in the sense that I I suggested the date at a place that I normally go to, and I took my book with me anyway because I'd be going there to have a drink, read a few chapters of a book, enjoy the sunshine on a Sunday afternoon anyway. So it was actually only until I was actually 2 chapters way through my book when I realized, oh, this guy isn't going to be turning up. So I didn't necessarily feel like I missed out on too much. So I thought, yeah, the approach isn't so bad, but it's no excuse.
No.
It's bad behavior. So yes, and it did feel a bit shit. But I didn't let that stop me. Picked myself up, dusted myself off, and I've had a few dates this week. I have a date later on today and tomorrow. So
Go. You're on fire. Well, today is International Women's Day. And so we're going to have a special episode where we celebrate the women in our lives, but also from near and far. Those have made groundbreaking discoveries, those that have made headway into leading change within their communities, within their industries, using their positions of influence to stand up for human rights worldwide. And today we want to reflect on the progress we've made and also hear from some of those women who've contributed to that. And so that we can remember to join them and remember what we're doing and why we're doing it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to share some very poignant speeches from women.
I love this.
And I love this. And it was Bhavna's idea. Thank you, Bhavna's fantastic idea. And what struck me when we were researching some of these was I kind of got a bit disappointed first. And it was because I thought, well, and I can take responsibility for this myself. But if I think what are the best speeches you can remember? And it's ones I've heard being talked about. And it would be like, I had a dream, Martin Luther King, and other famous like Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Barack Obama. I remember seeing a really good speech by Jim Carrey once. It's fantastic. And these have all been shown to me or talked about, and they're all men. And I think, crikey, actually, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I don't recall people really talking about women's speeches or it being shared in the media or by a mentor or any of that. And I just think, why is that? I mean, I don't know if that's your experience, but that's my experience.
Yeah, it's a good point you raised, definitely. And I don't know if it's a case of men get the attention when they have a perspective, or whether or not it's a case of, that's, I suppose, in a way, this is why we're talking about what we talk about. We're here because we're highlighting women having a voice, and not even just women, everybody has a voice. And it's about, and when it comes to speeches and about, great speeches, it's about having a platform, an opportunity to speak your truth, to deliver a perspective, to question authority, even to question perspectives. That's what it's about. And I think in history, with women compared to men, women haven't had as many opportunities as men to take the podium, to take the stand. And maybe that's why how it's just turned out. And that's why it's even more important that in today's episode, we are looking at women's speeches and dedicating this time and sharing just how powerful they are.
But that's the thing, you're right. Maybe that's part of it. But the ones we're going to share, I don't remember people talking about them so much. And I'm just like, well, what's that about? Because they're amazing, powerful calls to action, even.
Yeah.
And I don't remember them making the news, being talked about, being shared. That just, to me, signals something very wrong.
Yeah. You've definitely raised a good point. And it's maybe it could be because the individuals making these speeches, they've been put in a spotlight, especially in a media spotlight, for other things aside from these very powerful speeches, very powerful messages that they say, and the focus has been put on other things that they've done rather than these particular speeches.
True. Well, without further ado, let's get stuck in. So,
yes.
Which one spoke to you the most?
So am I going to be one kicking this off? Yeah. So when I began looking into this and selecting the speeches that I wanted to share in today's podcast, it was actually quite an emotional task for me. So just over the last few days, as this has been mentioned, I've been reading around and reminding myself of some very powerful speeches, and there were so many to choose from. And when I was reading through each of them, some words, some sentences that had been spoken, and I hadn't heard those speeches in such a long time, they really did resonate with me, and it really did bring up so much emotion. And I got quite tearful with some of them. So the one that I've picked to start off with is the fact that Tracy, you and I are both in Australia, and the fact that we're looking at women's speeches. I thought we can't but mention the misogyny speech by Julia Gillard. So that's the one I've gone with. This is what I'm going to be sharing today. This speech was spoken by Julia Gillard while she was the Australian female Prime Minister back in October 2012. And a little bit of a backstory around this. Basically, there was a speaker in the Australian Parliament who had unfortunately been picked up on sending some questionable text messages to an aide. And the leader of the opposition party, from Julia Gillard, he basically accused Julia Gillard of being sexist for not basically calling this out. And this was Julia,
it a woman?
The leader of the opposition is male.
No, I mean calling what out? The text.
So the speaker at the time was a male, and he was the Speaker of Parliament, and he'd basically been highlighted. He'd been caught sending some questionable text messages to a female aide.
Right, got it. Yeah.
And the leader of the opposition, who is male, called this out. Yeah. And because Julia Gillard didn't necessarily highlight it in any of her motions, she was accused of being sexist by the leader of the opposition. And this is how she responded. So this is her speech. The leader of the opposition says that people who hold sexist views and who are misogynists are not appropriate for high office. Well, I hope the leader of the opposition has got a piece of paper and he is writing out his resignation, because if he wants to know what misogyny looks like in modern Australia, he doesn't need a motion in a House of Representatives. He needs a mirror. That's what he needs. Good sense, common sense, proper process is what should rule this parliament. That's what I believe is the path forward for this parliament, not the kind of double standards and political game playing imposed by the leader of the opposition, now looking at his watch because apparently a woman's spoken too long. I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Not now, not ever. And I remember when I read this speech again yesterday, and I hadn't read it for such a long time, because it's been about over 10 years since those words were spoken in Australian Parliament. And when I was reading it yesterday, I was reminded by just how, with so much fury and so much, it was such a great speech. For me, this was the speech where you have Julia Gillard, who's the first female prime minister in Australia, who she's obviously worked so hard to get where she is. She's obviously been in an industry, in the political landscape here in Australia, where she's obviously experienced sexism probably on a daily basis. And actually, in this speech that she gave, I've given a shorter version, but in the speech, she actually gave 3 examples of why she was saying what she was saying. And I think at this point in time, when she gave this speech, I think it was basically the time where she was saying, I have simply had enough. This was the scenario where the leader of the opposition had accused her of being sexist around what happened. And I think she had come to a point where she had heard enough from everyone in Parliament, all the males in Parliament. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back. And she just sliced through. And for me, this speech is saying, I've had enough. The book stops here. I'm not putting up with this any longer. And that's why it was just so powerful. And I think it actually reverberated globally. And that was 10 years ago. And I think today, on International Women's Day, it's a great reminder. If you haven't heard the speech, I would encourage you to go onto YouTube and actually hear this 15-minute speech. But if not, then definitely have a look at the transcript. And if you can read this transcript, it's just such a powerful speech. And it's basically, the message is she's had enough and she's laying it down. And she's setting her boundary. And it's for today, International Women's Day, I think it's a great reminder to have.
And what were the 3 examples? Do you remember?
The 3 examples that she called out was, they were quite horrific, actually. They were basically, one of the examples was when the leader of the opposition party was, previous to this, he had basically stepped out on the steps of Parliament, and there was a plaque of Julia Gillard being described as a witch and a bitch. And he had stood next to that. And it was in support of that claim, or in support of that description of her. And she called it out. Wow. And saying that here you are. She was basically pointing at but she was directing her fury at the leader of the opposition, basically calling out his double standards. She described 3 double standards that he had presented in Parliament. Basically, she was putting egg on his face, but more than that, she was actually putting a mirror up to him, which is why I loved that part in the speech where she says he doesn't need a motion in the House of Representatives, he needs a mirror. That was pure gold.
Okay. Gold. So she was calling out examples where he is playing a double standard and he's being misogynistic. Right, got it now. Oh, good.
And honestly, and I have to say, you know how Tracy, you were mentioning about why haven't we heard of all of this? I think it's actually, I know it happened a few years ago. I don't know if it's still happening, but this misogyny speech is actually being used in Australian schools as part of the education system. And I think it's a fantastic, it's a pure example of when you are faced with sexism and misogyny accusations, or you're in the face of double standards. This is a gem of an example of how to basically respond.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good one. I like that one. It just made me think of, because I've got a few lists here. It's like, well, linking to that one, there was one by, I'm just thinking where I saw it. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she ran for office in America. So this is in America. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think that's how you pronounce her name. What had happened, just to put some context in here, so she was representing Florida, Congresswoman, and one of the, I guess, opposition or somebody going against her, a man called Ted Yoho, reportedly called her an effing bitch, right? On the steps. So he did this in public, right?
I remember this, yes.
And he tried to excuse his behavior by saying, oh, I have a wife and daughters. How many times have you heard that? I'm not a sexist or a misogynist or whatever because I have a wife and daughter. I've heard that so many times. It's quite funny. Anyway, it's not funny. And in response, or when he apologized, I've got a wife and daughter, whatever. She took to the House floor with this. I'm someone's daughter too. My father, thankfully, is not alive to see how Mr. Yoho treated his daughter. My mother got to see Mr. Yoho's disrespect on the floor of this house towards me on television. And I'm here because I have to show my parents that I am their daughter and that they did not raise me to accept abuse from men. What I believe is that having a daughter does not make a man decent. Having a wife does not make a man decent. Treating people with dignity and respect makes a man decent. And when a decent man messes up, as we are all bound to do, he tries his best and does apologize. I like that because that man was making kind of justifying himself. Like, he wasn't a genuine apology.
Not at all. He wasn't taking accountability of what he had said and the impact that it had on this individual.
Exactly. Because how would you like it if somebody called his daughter or his wife that?
And that's exactly what this individual, yes. What's her name?
Her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They call her AOC for short. That's kind of her name now.
That's exactly what AOC was leading to. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just not appropriate.
And it's double standards again, isn't it? It's like, oh, you can say this to me and find this acceptable and justify it. Would you say that to your daughter? Or how would you react if your daughter came back from school or university or the workplace and she was called this? Would you have the same response to support your daughter around this? It's again that whole double standard.
And also it's like, I don't know why. It's all about our expectations. And I need to get over this. But with politics, you hold them to a higher standard because they've got everybody's lives in their hands, right? Like, everybody's life is in their hands, these politicians. So I don't, you can watch Parliament or House of Representatives, you can watch TV channels, people watch that stuff. And I hear them talking to each other and I'm like, am I watching a show about people at school? Because I feel like my expectations of how they should be communicating, even if they have opposing ideas and opinions, is not what I see play out. And it just is really scary. And I think sometimes these people are running the country. So I guess my point is it acceptable to call somebody in opposition to you what you're calling them? What point are you making? So anyway, that was one for me.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's a great reminder too about how you can stand up for it with your words. Right, yeah, which is great. So the next speech that I've selected is from Frances McDormand, which is an Oscar speech. And the reason why I've selected this one is because when Frances won her Oscar, she introduced something called Inclusion Rider, which I wasn't actually aware of. I've worked in TV and film before in the past, and Inclusion Rider is something that our listeners may not be familiar with either. And so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to put this out there. So Inclusion Rider is a concept whereby when you're producing a film or a production, you can actually include a clause in your contract to ensure that there is diversity in the cast and the crew. And that clause is called inclusion rider. And so it's not something we hear about a lot in the news, in the media, in the entertainment industry. And the fact that the Oscars, which is on a worldwide basis and televised globally, and it's one of the top platforms in entertainment, and the fact that this actress, Frances McDormand, took the opportunity, took the podium, took this stage as a moment to highlight inclusion rider, I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic. So I'll share Frances McDormand's Oscar speech. So after she obviously took her gold Oscar and thanked everyone in her team, this is what she went on to say. And now I want to get some perspective. If I may be so honored to have all the female nominees in every category stand with me in this room tonight. And at this point, all the female actors and every female who had been nominated in any category throughout the Oscar ceremony stood up. And Frances went on to say, the filmmakers, the producers, the directors, the writers, the cinematographer, the composers, the songwriters, the designers. Come on, okay, look around, everybody. Look around, ladies and gentlemen, because we all have stories to tell and projects we need financed. Don't talk to us about it at the parties tonight. Invite us into your office in a couple of days, or you can come to ours, whatever suits you best, and we'll tell you all about them. I have 2 words to leave with you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Inclusion rider.
Wow.
And she got a standing ovation, obviously, for that, and deservedly. But the fact that it was like a mic drop, just those 2 words, inclusion rider, and then she left the stage, because those 2 words is what the whole audience was left with. And that's also what was focused on at that time. But since then, we haven't heard enough of it. Maybe it's because it's happening, but who knows? But I thought that it'd be a good one to share.
Yeah, I really like that. I did read another example. It didn't say all those words, didn't give all the details of the speech, and I didn't know what that meant, inclusion rider, when I read it. It wasn't put in context. So really good to know that exists. And you reminded me of something else. I don't know whose it is, because I wasn't going to do it. And it's essentially saying, what it says, look around in your workplace. If you all look the same, then you should be embarrassed. It's saying, to consider people with different ability, people with different ethnic backgrounds, people with different gender, people with different sexuality. I don't know if those exact words, because I can't find it now. I wasn't going to do it. But I was like, yeah, if you look around and you're pretty much the same as everyone, then we're not where we need to be.
That's right. Yeah. And I think it was from either a Hollywood actress or something. It's from someone in the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, it applies to everyone. But then I play devil's advocate, because I like my last career, pretty much only person of color. This is a pattern. Only person of color in my office. When I think about it, no, that's not strictly true. There was some people from Asian backgrounds, so they're people of color as well. But a minority, literally like 3 then out of, I don't know, 50 or whatever. Yeah. So that's kind of been my story, my whole career. And I have actually been the only one. So I'm thinking like the only 2 sides to that coin. But then the point I was trying to make is, in some places it's not fair to say that they should be more diverse. And I was like, well, where would that be? And to me, the only place that's okay is that out in the country where people may not live. But in the places like cities, metros, the diversity is there. Yes. Even if it's not as great as what it would be in London or parts of the UK or America, for sure.
Yes.
In Australia, in Sydney, Melbourne, there's no excuse.
And what you've just said there, it does remind me too. And I noticed this when I started my job. I am also the minority on my floor. If I look around, there is probably one other person who looks like me, discounting the finance team or IT. But again, that's for a different podcast.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you think in those terms, because sometimes I've had girlfriends say to me, oh, really, is that such a problem these days? Equality, like no concept. And I'm just thinking, all you need to do is look around you, probably at work, and the diversity around. Then you ask yourself that a question again. I mean, even in the IT, like just say it's a lot of people from India or Asian countries because, it attracts a lot of IT skills and expertise. That's not diverse enough. But actually, my IT, do you know what? I won't say, well, the IT guys, what happened is they outsourced to Asian country. So all the workers, they were literally in Asia. Mm-hmm. And the managers were all white Australians, pretty much, who were still in the office.
But that could be because of budgets, but...
Oh, yeah, I get the outsourcing, like, that's a old age story of lots of industries, so lots of things, I get that. But there's so many. And I remember when we had it in-house, it was diverse group of people. The job does attract a lot of people from the Asian background. I get that. Yeah. But it was diverse. There was like a mix of...
But maybe that's because, and again, it's like that's what I was saying about maybe for a different podcast, because maybe that's because there are, and I can speak from experience that with Indian communities, if you're male or female, the community encourages you into certain areas, into certain jobs even, such as IT, such as business and finance.
Yeah, I get it.
As it happens, and the consequence being that there is lack of diversity in all the other industries, such as the creative industry, especially, which is actually why when it comes to any Indians who are producers, writers, filmmakers, I am a big supporter of that. And so I always show up, I always buy the book, because it's my way of supporting that particular individual in an industry which they were probably not encouraged to go into.
Yeah. So. Just similarly, if I see there's a Nigerian artist, I'm like all over it because the same reason. They were all told to be lawyers and doctors and whatever, professors. Because that's what they were encouraged to become. Well, we're going to get sidetracked. I want to get the speeches. Let's get the speech.
That's what they're saying. It's picking out themes for another podcast.
Yeah, true. Whose go is it? Is it me or you?
Okay, yes, your go. Yes, Tracy.
All right. So that was the rider one. Speaking of Nigerians, I really wanted to talk about this Nigerian lady who I read a book and I discovered her coming to a festival. This writers, I can't remember the name of the festival. It wasn't the Writers' Festival. It's like Dangerous Ideas, but then it changed its name to something else. I can't remember anyway. Doesn't matter. She was here. I was like, oh, she's Nigerian. And I got a book. And her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Okay, she's American. And she's an author. And she had this speech. And apparently some of her words from this speech made it into one of Beyonce's songs.
I love it. That's great.
I love it. Yeah, yeah.
I think she did a TED talk, didn't she?
And she probably has done a lot. She's the author, right? And in this speech, she reflects on the gender disparity still evident in our society. And she focuses on Africa. That's where she's from. And the meaning of feminist and the connotations and the myths it carries and how she came to define the term herself. So this is what she says. We teach girls to shrink themselves, to make themselves smaller. We say to girls, you can have ambition, but not too much. You should aim to be successful, but not too successful, otherwise you would threaten the man. But what if we question the premise itself? Why should a woman's success be a threat to a man? I want to be respected in all of my femaleness because I deserve to be. Gender is not an easy conversation to have for both men and women. To bring up gender is sometimes to encounter almost immediate resistance. Some of the men here might be thinking, okay, all of this is interesting, but I don't think I like that. And that is part of the problem, that many men do not actively think about gender or notice gender is part of the problem. And what I like about that is that idea, because I hear that a lot. I see that a lot in cultures, especially cultures like ours, where you're encouraged to get education, but then at the same time you're expected to give up opportunities that can give you to look after the family and be at home. Or even what I think is kind of worse, almost, or I don't know if it's worse, is you're expected to give up the opportunities to do both, because you can't actually necessarily, without support, really thrive in one.
It's
that way.
It's like putting limitations on potential. It's like boiling a kettle but putting a lid on it.
Exactly.
And that's something that women in our culture, both our cultures, experience. For sure. And it's great that someone's calling it out, and that's what these speeches are all about. It's about these issues that are happening, and nobody's calling them out until we hear these speeches. And there's that podium, there's that stage, there's that opportunity where a light is being shone on exactly what's happening. And it does make, these speeches are food for thought. They're making us all think and all reflect and all look at ourselves and think, well, how are we contributing to this?
Yeah. And also when we're being silent about it, because being silent is in itself is a choice, because if you're being silent, who are you helping?
That's exactly it. Yeah. And I think that's why I got quite emotional yesterday when I took this task to do. I was coming across so many amazing, powerful words that I was reading, and I was thinking about situations that I've recently been in where I've been witness, unfortunately, to people who have stayed silent when they could have spoken up. And it actually triggered a lot of emotion, these speeches.
Yeah. I'll admit I've been silent. I'm not saying I'm a saint and never been silent. I have. And the reason I've talked about this before on here is because of my own stuff, that I was so emotionally charged that I had to be silent. I felt I had to be silent, or the opposite of that would have been, the message I would have liked to have made would have been missed in the overwhelming, powerful emotions of anger and injustice that I felt in the moment. And so that's why I was silent. But what I've come to realize is working on myself helps take away the charge, so that if I'm faced with those situations again, I'm able to resourcefully respond and give the meaning and the point I want to make. Whereas before, because of my stuff, I wasn't able to do that. And that's the reason I'm giving for why I was silent, because I knew that what would come out wouldn't be how I wanted to come out. Like that Julia Gillard, I'm not saying don't feel angry. She was angry, but she's able to resourcefully articulate her message. I was too overcome that I would not have been able to do that in a resourceful way. And the only way I can do that now is by dealing with my stuff. So I always say it starts with yourself. If you're finding yourself silent more often than not, then I'd say be looking within, doing some work. But anyway, we've got time for a couple more.
That's great to share, for sure. Yes. And on that silence part of things, the final speech that I'd like to highlight. Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, we'll do 2 more. I want to do another one.
Okay. So as we're talking about International Women's Day, so I thought I'd select a not so much a speech, but it's something that has been spoken by Angelina Joli, who people who know me know that I am a massive Jolie fan. I am definitely Team Jolie. I've always admired Angelina, not only just for the commitment she puts into her work, but the dedication that she puts in and the work she puts in for the humanitarian rights of on a global scale is just phenomenal. And I'm a big fan of Jolie because of her transition. When she was much younger, she was a child of Hollywood, and she went through all of the typical Hollywood kind of journey that you go through, and she could have gone in so many other directions, but she chose a path to reflect on herself and her fame and where she can add purpose. And that's the path she went through. And that was a massive turning point. And that's when I really looked at her. And that's when I started following her journey. So this is something that Angelina Jolie has shared. We've all felt quite small at times. We have all felt scared and alone, and working in this business probably often felt valued for the wrong things or taken advantage of. Every woman has probably experienced double standards, abuse of power, and a lack of accountability, and has had to fight to stay soft and open. For as much as we discuss inequality here, it is nothing compared to the limitations and abuse that women face in many other parts of the world. So while we fight here, we have to look outside of here to the women and girls who are refugees, who are stateless, who are facing hunger and violence and fighting every day for basic rights and respect. To every girl listening, know this. It is a gift to be a woman. That others may choose to suggest it is in any way less only shows their fear of your power. Stay kind and soft, but own that power. And that's what I love about Angelina Jolie is her representation of women and power.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I just find it interesting, like those things, kind and soft, are like qualities that are associated with women, not just women, but men, but, the softer specifically. And it's like, on the one hand, it's used as a strength, and on the other hand, it's used as a weakness. Because I've been told, I'm just thinking our feedback in previous jobs, I've been too soft. Whether I agree with that or not, it's irrelevant. What I would have liked, even if that was true, I would have liked it to be said in a way that was like, you could have set a better boundary or more significant consequences, because I would say those would be more the words that you would say to a man. If there was around the same thing, you wouldn't be saying, oh, you're too soft. Or you might. But I'm just thinking generally what you hear. I'm generalizing completely that being soft is a bad thing. And actually, if he said, saying that to me, oh, you're too soft, doesn't really give me feedback.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's not feedback.
Yeah.
It's an opinion. If you're in professional, you'll have to be specific. How am I soft? I should have said. It's all great in hindsight and having more, in what way? Like, and those would be the things that you could be talking about. You could be saying consequences, or you could be talking about boundaries. You could be talking about lots of things, but they're more relevant than the term, oh, you're too soft. And I just think it's used, that obviously uses a criticism in that respect.
Yeah, and also softness it's not a weakness, being soft takes strength.
It's necessary as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's brave to be soft. So yeah.
Anyway, just the double standards, I guess, of the word, the use of the word and the term and the context it's used, and I feel like it's more gender specific there. Yeah. And like you say,
and what Angelina is saying, I love how she highlights that we all have our individual journey, but there are communities who are not as privileged as the community that we live in, and they go through these same issues too, and to make space for that. And that's why I absolutely love Angelina Jolie. She represents those communities.
Yeah. Well, it's a universal problem. I mean, she's right. There's communities that don't even have basic rights. We're still fighting for rights. And that brings me to this story, this other speech, the last one, from Hilary Clinton at one of these women's international, it might have been a UN event as well. And it's quite a long speech. It's probably about 10, 15 minutes. You can look it up if you want to. Okay, so this is Hilary Clinton, Women's Rights Are Human Rights speech, 1995, that she made this speech. And she was like, if there's one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all. Let us not forget that among those rights are the right to speak freely and the right to be heard. And she said that at a women's rights conference, the United Nations Fourth World Conference in Women in Beijing, of all places. And she was defying the US administration and the Chinese as well in their remarks. It was a really good speech. This full-blown attack against policies abusing unheard women around the globe, not just China. As long as discrimination and inequalities remain so commonplace around the world, as long as girls and women are valued less, fed last, overworked, underpaid, not schooled, and subjected to violence in and out of their homes, the potential of the human family to create a peaceful, prosperous world will not be realized.
Wow. And you said that in Beijing.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that for me is what's called going for the jugular.
That's what they said.
Oh, is that what I said?
It says then she went for the jugular. I just missed that bit out.
Yeah, that's just literally, that's aiming right through to the heart, isn't it? So that's brave, but it's needed, it's necessary.
And she wasn't just talking about China, although it was poignant where she was saying the speech. She was talking about other countries, even the US. We see it now, industries dominated by women, highly underpaid, or minorities, highly underpaid. What's going on in the nursing in the UK at the minute? Strikes happening here. They're just so undervalued, underpaid.
And it's interesting, that speech that Hilary Clinton spoke of, that was 1995. And, at that time, and again, with all of these speeches, it's a speech which it's powerful because it does make us look inwards. It makes us reflect on our own actions, on our own thoughts, on our own perspectives, how we're contributing to this. And that was back in 1995. And what you've just mentioned now, Tracy, it's still happening. And, and I think this is why it's important to relive these speeches. So we're constantly reminded, we're constantly being given that reminder about these powerful words, about how we should be reflecting, or, we should be really reflecting.
Yeah. So we have to, I guess, end it. It's just a shame because
I know. Am I able to end it on a because I know you mentioned about Hillary Clinton doing a UN speech. So is it possible to end on a UN speech by Meghan Markle? Short one. So this was Meghan back in 2015, and Meghan Markle said, "It is said that girls with dreams become women with vision. May we empower each other to carry out such vision, because it isn't enough to simply talk about equality. One must believe it, and it isn't enough to simply believe in it. One must work at it. Let us work at it together, starting now."
Love it.
That's a great one to end on.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, though, the International Women's Day theme this year is embrace equity as opposed to equality. And I talked about this before, because equality isn't enough. Talks to equality not being enough, because it reminds us that it's equity that is a focus. And equity is, I love the imagery that they give when we do this. It's giving people what they need to thrive and reach the same place. Yeah, as opposed to giving everybody the same thing, which is equality. And there's some great imagery to explain this. There's one where, just simple, there's a child, a man, a woman, somebody with a disability, okay? And it shows them all being given a bike, exactly the same bike, equality. The child can't ride it. The woman struggles because of the seat thing, and the person with a disability can't ride it. They're in a wheelchair, right? But then the other image is, well, this is equity, and it gives the person with a disability like a modified cycle. It gives the child a smaller one. It gives the man the same one. It gives the woman the one with the saddle thing so that she can sit comfortably. And that's really great analogy for me for equity. It's giving people what they need, their individual needs, so that they can thrive and obtain the same as everybody else. That's the difference between equality and equity. So the themes for this year is embrace equity.
I really like that. I didn't know that. That's great. International Women's Day, equity. Okay, great. That's brilliant. Well, I've really enjoyed this session, this podcast, Tracy.
Me too.
And thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to contribute and also share some of the speeches that also resonate with myself and
Oh,
with others.
I'm just going to name drop now because there's so many we could have done. Queen Elizabeth. Oh my gosh. There was one in there. Amazing. Virginia Woolf. I'm trying to think of all the names that came up, and there was so many.
Yeah.
Go and look at them. Look them up.
Yeah, there's from history, there's Marie Claire. From recent times in popular culture, there's even Emma Watson.
Yeah.
So many. There's just
so many.
Yeah.
Go and look at them up. They're amazing. All right. That's it. It's all got time for this week.
Great. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you. It's a great one. Thanks. Bye. Have a lovely week.
Bye.
Bye.